Malfunction, 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 malfunction. Oh my god, malfunction.
For the past year and a half, I have been researching a show that you have probably never heard of. And if you have, you probably haven't thought about it in well over a decade. In 2006 through 2008, Hasbro partnered with V Corporation to bring My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party, to stages all across North America. And on October 19th, 2008, at the Family Arena in St. Charles, Missouri, I saw this production live. I was 6 years old. What was supposed to be a quick video on one of the shows that introduced me to live theater quickly spiraled into the realization that there was virtually zero information about this production anywhere online. And definitely no information on the people who actually brought this show to life. The ones who woke up every morning knowing they would soon be trapped in a life-size pony puppet while performing for thousands of children. The ones who left behind their family and friends to tour the country because they were so passionate about the work they were doing. All of the information that I could find was from the perspective of an audience member, and not to brag, been there, done that. I wanted to know more about the logistics of actually taking the show on the road. And now I have hours of exclusive interviews with members of the cast and crew, behind the scenes photos, and a whole video essay of never before released information. So I guess what I should be saying is that there was virtually no information about this production anywhere online until today. So come with me as we dive deep into the history of My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party, and uncover some of the secrets of this hidden piece of production history. What is it?
Cool.
Your Christmas tree from a very busy Christmas. I think that my pony. Another pony. Easter got carried away.
Didn't you say you didn't have that before?
I did not have the Sundays.
Okay,
not a one big one, not a single small one either.
Is this really the world's biggest tea party?
Actually, yes it is. It is the world's biggest tea party according to Pinkie Pie.
According to Pinkie Pie, we have Pinkie Pie back here behind us.
She's singing. She's moving.
See? I turned it on.
Pretty good.
In 1981, Republican politician Ronald Reagan became the 40th president of the United States. I'm just kidding. Believe it or not, Ronald Reagan is not actually relevant to every video essay. A shocker. I know. My Little Pony was created by designer Bonnie D. Zachary, a Massachusetts native with a degree in illustration from Syracuse University. Zachary did primarily freelance work for Hasbro through the mid to late 70s, with the understanding that a full-time position would be waiting for her if she ever chose to take it. After the greeting card company she'd been working at for over a decade was sold, she resigned and took Hasbro up on their offer. In 1980, Zachary officially joined the team, working as an illustrator in the research and development department. Little did she know the children's toy industry, and perhaps more importantly, its tie to American television, was about to change forever. In the 1960s, as television was becoming a staple in the American home, the United States government passed laws regulating on-screen advertisements. While these laws applied to content for all age demographics, there was a particular emphasis on content for children. The Federal Communications Commissions, or FCC, banned toy manufacturers from using TV to sell directly to children, and put limits on how much airtime could be designated for advertisements. These regulations were designed to make sure television continued to prioritize public interest over corporate wealth, while still attempting to navigate what was still a relatively new industry. However, in 1981, Republican politician Ronald Reagan became the 40th president of the United States.
Oh, brother!
I guess he was relevant after all. His administration fought to loosen the restrictions. He believed less government intervention would allow the free market to flourish, and had support from the American Association of Advertising Agencies, the Association of National Advertisers, and the American Advertising Federation. He argued that advertisements were speech protected by the First Amendment, and any and all regulations crossed into dangerous territories if not properly clarified. Children's television was deregulated, the FCC stopped restricting major networks, and the children's animated landscape changed forever. Suddenly, children were bombarded with show after show designed solely to sell them things. Toy companies like Mattel and Hasbro ran programs that were relatively cheap to make, despite reaping huge monetary rewards through incentivizing children to buy their products. Shows were created to sell pre-existing toys, or created with characters they knew would be easy to turn into merchandise. Some of the most well-known shows from this era include She-Ra, Princess of Power, The Care Bears, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Transformers, and G.I. Joe. So this never-before-seen cutthroat world of television advertisements was the world that Bonnie D. Zachary was forced to navigate her first few years at Hasbro. The company needed something new, and it was up to Zachary and her team to make it happen. According to Zachary, quote, "I got the idea for My Pretty Pony, later changed to My Little Pony, because a pony was the only thing I ever wanted. I came up with the drawings of miniature, realistic horses, like a Pinto or a Palomino. While it might seem like a no-brainer today, the idea of a non-human figurine that served the same basic function as a doll instead of as an accessory was revolutionary at the time. For example, let's compare My Little Pony to, say, a pony you can buy for your Barbie dolls. Sure, they might be around the same size, probably made from the same materials, but the intended function of both of the toys is different. My Little Ponies can stand on their own. Children are encouraged to imagine stories for them outside of the role they play in a different toy's fictional life. Zachary leaned into that idea by giving the toys brushable manes and tails that could be styled similar to a Barbie doll. Zachary's marketing director also pushed for higher levels of extravagance, introducing the concept of changing the colors from more realistic colors like browns and blacks and whites to brighter shades of pink, purple, and blue. Zachary said, quote, "I initially told my director, 'Get out of my office,' to which she replied, 'Little girls like pink and purple. How about we just test it out on a test group?' I said fine. The rest was history. My Little Pony hit the shelves in 1983, and the ponies graced the silver screen for the first time in 1984, less than a year later. Of course, this isn't to say that smart advertising is the only reason that My Little Pony is so successful. Rather, I think it would be disingenuous to gloss over the specific media landscape that it found its success within. With the continued expansion of the My Little Pony brand came the introduction of generations. Every few years, My Little Pony would have a short hiatus, only to be rebooted with a brand new toy line, television series, and completely different aesthetic. Each of these reboots would be considered a new generation. So Generation 1 lasted from the brand's creation in 1983 to 1995, Generation 2 was from 1997 to 1999, and Generation 3, the one I'll be focusing on in this video, was from 2003 to 2009, and so on. Aside from major aesthetic differences in the toys that you can see here, here, and here, and the TV shows.
Oh, dressing up to get some fun ideas for a dress-up party. Can I look in the mirror? Shh, I'm creating. Loop around and flat. What'd I say? 10 seconds flat.
Generation 3 was known for lowering the target demographic of their products to ages 3 to 6 instead of their previous audience of 9-year-olds. When asked about it, the Hasbro senior brand manager at the time said this, quote, "The young girls market is becoming more focused on fashion, glamour, and glitz, but we are looking for a return to innocence for young girls with this new look range." Generation 3 also introduced the town of Ponyville, which would remain relevant in future generations, even if it looked completely different. It is important to remember that My Little Pony has always simultaneously been a piece of media and a piece of merchandise. Both aspects of the brand exist symbiotically. The shows are designed to sell the merchandise, and the merchandise encourages children to watch watch the show. It's an endless loop. Because of this, reboots were so much more than just changing how the toys looked. It was creating entirely new characters, plot lines, worlds, and concepts, often completely separate from the pre-established lore. Despite being the generation that I grew up with, I would argue that there isn't really anything particularly special about Generation 3 that makes it better suited for the stage. The only difference is the time in which it was created. In 1980, producer Vincent Egan founded V Corporation with the intention of creating a touring live show for Sesame Street. It all goes back to Sesame Street. At the time, there were only 3 touring family shows in the United States, one of which was Ice Follies, where Egan worked. He believed that live theater was an untapped market when it came to children's entertainment, a belief largely founded on the success of a Sesame Street segment within Ice Follies, which employed techniques that would later become standard among touring live shows, like full-body mascot suits and lip-syncing to pre-recorded audio. Character licensing was secured with the Children's Television Workshop, and Sesame Street Live graced the stage in September of 1980, just 6 months after the founding of V Corporation. While audience members were initially confused about what a live show actually entailed, the marketing was refined and Sesame Street Live was a huge success. That Christmas, the show went on to play for 4 weeks at Madison Square Garden's 4,000-seat Felt Forum in New York City before an audience of 100,000 people. V Corp went on to become the leading company for touring children's entertainment, helping to translate oogles of television shows to the stage. These shows include, but are not limited to, The Muppet Show, Muppet Babies, Bear in the Big Blue House, Curious George, Dragon Tales, Care Bears, Barney, and Kids Bop. V Corp, now known as V-Star Entertainment Group, still produces live shows today, having recently worked on Paw Patrol Live, Trolls Live, and yes, still Sesame Street Live. Based on their show dates, it appears that V-Star peaked in popularity in the early 2000s, and that seems pretty standard for touring live shows in general. Remember, at this point social media existed, but not quite in the same scale that we know it today. TV was the main source of digital entertainment for kids. They only ever saw one version of the show they liked, the version on TV. Without social media, the novelty of seeing a million different versions of a million different things all the time wasn't as quick to wear off. The trend of live-action remakes of popular animated movies had yet to begin, and Disney on Broadway was still relatively new, making it significantly less accessible to the average American. If you wanted to see the characters and worlds that you loved in a new, fun, and exciting way, touring live shows were the way to do it. Thanks to relatively cheap production costs and the promise of a pre-existing audience, the shows could expect to fill giant venues. The more tickets sold, the cheaper they could be, making them significantly more accessible than, say, a Broadway tour. Tickets for My Little Pony Live ranged from $12 to $20, with VIP tickets costing only $25 per seat. If you wanted to see, say, the touring production of The Lion King in 2007, you could expect to pay anywhere between $60 to $100 per seat, which is 4 times the price of My Little Pony Live. And remember, you can never buy just one ticket, because kids can't go alone. A grown-up has to go with them. And by touring, the shows were also more geographically accessible. My Little Pony Live stopped in states like Missouri, Tennessee, Arkansas, Iowa, and North Dakota. You didn't have to be located in one of the entertainment capitals of the country to have access to live theater. And for a lot of people, myself included, touring live shows were my first introduction to live theater. Live shows were fun, relatively cheap, and an easy way for parents to create special memories for their kids. But remember, this only works if the shows are tied to a pre-existing piece of IP. Just like My Little Pony toys and TV shows exist symbiotically, so do TV shows and touring live shows. If only there was a popular piece of media with distinct characters, built-in merchandise, pre-existing songs, maybe, that little girls everywhere were losing their minds over. Oh wait. It seemed only natural that Hasbro hop on the bandwagon, and sometime in the early 2000s, My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party, was developed, just in time for its 2006 stage debut and 2008 DVD release.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dana Davis, and we are live here at the Expo Center for My Little Pony Live. And I'm here with Chris Harper, who's the performance director of My Little Pony. What will kids learn when they watch today's show?
They'll learn about friendship and fun and what it is to help each other out in times of need and you know, good things like that that we all need to learn at a very young age.
Is this really the world's biggest tea party?
Actually, yes, it is. It is the world's biggest tea party, according to Pinkie Pie.
According to Pinkie Pie, we have Pinkie Pie back here behind us.
This show is practically bursting at the seams with everything that made Generation 3 a success for its preschool age demographic. Bright colors, original music, and some of the most popular characters grace the stage for the first time. Directed by Richard D. Thompson, with performance directing by Chris Harper and original music by John Baker, who also did the music for Bear in the Big Blue House Live. I love Bear in the Big Blue House Live. The show would use pre-recorded audio done by the same voice actors as the various Gen 3 TV shows and movies. This audio would be lip-synced along to by various mascot characters and a plethora of giant pony puppets that can fit a whole human inside and also blink.
Malfunction.
The show was advertised on local news outlets, both articles and videos, and even had its own website. It was at this point in my research that I was beginning to become frustrated with how little information there was out there about what it was actually like to be part of this production. And believe me, I had done my digging. You don't just post hour-long video essays online if you're not good at research. I did my research. It became abundantly clear to me that if I wanted insider information, I was going to have to go directly to the source. And so I made it my own personal mission to try to get in contact with literally anyone who had worked on this production. The only thing I had to go off of was a list of names from the credits of the DVD version of the show, some of which led to IMDb profiles, most of which did not. I spent hours just Googling names in hopes that I would find the right people. I went through people's LinkedIn pages, I looked at people's employment history on Facebook, and even when I was fairly certain I had found the right person, there was almost always no way for me to contact them. Most of these people didn't have publicly available emails, their social media accounts were privated, and even when I was able to find a way to contact someone, no one was responding. And there was no way of me knowing if it was because I had the wrong person, if I had the wrong email, if they hadn't seen it, if they simply weren't interested in talking with me. There was so much unknown. I spent 7 full months trying to get in contact with literally anyone who would be willing to talk to me about this show. And for all intents and purposes, I had given up. I decided I didn't want the rest of my research to go to waste. I would post the video, and no one online would ever need to know how in-depth I had truly hoped to go. All of the footage you've been watching of me in that pink shirt on the couch is from July of 2025. Since then, I've gotten a perm and glasses.
And he was wearing reading glasses to show that time had passed.
I got 3 days into editing that version of the video when I got an email.
My name is Tim Coette. I played Rainbow Dash on all 2 years of the My Little Pony Live tour.
And because Tim is so generous with his time and knowledge, he got me in contact with so many more members of the production.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Newcorn. I played Sweetberry, the pony.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Armbruster, and I played Ladybug #1.
Lisa Marie Fulton. I came in and replaced the performer who played Wisteria, the purple pony.
I was on tour from 06 to 07.
I joined in the summer of 2007 and ended the first season and toured the whole second season.
And not just cast members, also members of the crew and production team.
My name's Casey Gray. I was the company manager, was the official title. It was like the road manager, the tour manager. And I was on the show from pre-production all the way through strike.
My name is Kate Wolf. I was first wardrobe assistant.
And finally, after all of these months, my questions about what it was like to bring My Little Pony to life were answered. I quickly learned there was no end-all be-all audition process for My Little Pony Live. V Corporation was such a massive corporation that they were constantly holding massive auditions all over the country.
So when I first auditioned for My Little Pony Live, it wasn't exactly a My Little Pony Live specific audition. I was in my senior year of college. I was a musical theater major. So I went to sort of a big cattle call audition. I auditioned for a lot of different places, and then a company called the V Corporation was there as well.
My friend had found that they were going to be in, I went to school in Boston, and they were going to be in the Massachusetts area. She said, do you have class on Friday? Do you want to come with me to this audition? I just went to my friend's dorm room and took a picture on her bathroom floor, and that's what I used as my headshot.
Most of these auditions were for the company as a whole, meaning you were auditioning for literally every single production that they were putting on at the time. Your experiences could differ greatly depending on the day, city, or even year that you were auditioning.
I wanted to do Sesame Street Live since I was 5, and it was my first audition straight out of college back in 2003, and I didn't get it. But I had, since that first audition, moved to the Twin Cities, and I started working for a local sports team and kind of accidentally became their mascot. I'm not even kidding, it was an accident. And I saw the same audition was coming through Minneapolis. I had that costume character experience on my resume. So I was like, okay, well, you know, the first time I auditioned, I had like no experience. I knew this time to go like full out, like as big as possible. Like even if I screwed up the dance moves, it was like, no, you just want to be big.
Because it was Sesame Street Live, it was the company that also did Sesame Street Live, I was also auditioning for the people, the real people. So I think that they had us do a song and read like a nursery rhyme or like a little short children's story.
But I did the audition like I would do any musical theater audition. I sang, I think I maybe did a small dance combination, and then it wasn't until a couple of weeks later that I heard from them in a little bit more detail, and it turned out that they were looking to cast a first ever live performance of My Little Pony, and that they were interested in me. I guess I was just the right height for the costumes.
And because My Little Pony Live was the first show of its kind, none of the people that I interviewed auditioned for that specific show. In fact, several of the people that I interviewed had no idea there would ever be a My Little Pony stage show until they got the casting offer. They were some of the first people to know.
Was there any sort of like callback process, or was that kind of it?
That was it.
So that ended up being my first professional performing job as a My Little Pony.
I also think it's important to note that while I'm speaking about these experiences in past tense, V Corporation, now known as V-Star Entertainment, does still exist and continues to hold auditions all over the country. You can even submit a self-tape right now on their website. It's hard to know if the audition protocol has changed at all since My Little Pony Live, but a lot of these actors' experiences are pretty standard. I wouldn't be surprised if they still run things the same way. And of course, if you're a crew member, your experience is going to look a lot different. They're not going to make you sing or dance. So I've heard.
I was a intern on Sesame Street Live, and they needed a company manager for a show that was getting ready to close. I believe it was Dragon Tales. And then from there, I just sort of jumped from show to show where they needed me. And then I finally got my own show. That was kind of the big deal, is I get my own show. And it was My Little Pony. And we started production. I got to be involved in all of it. It was great.
Can you talk a little bit more about what specifically a like show or a tour manager does for people who might not be familiar?
With consultant, the home office, you do some hiring and firing. You're in charge of the hotel, the rental cars, the transportation from city to city. You're also in charge of basically counting all the tickets, counting all the money, making sure that everything is organized. Now, again, you have a whole support team at the home office. Company manager was basically, they did it all.
As exciting as an opportunity like this is, joining the production is not a decision to be made lightly. It's a commitment to being away from your friends and family for nearly a year, in some cases, nearly 2 years. It's leaving nearly everything behind to pursue this passion.
V Corporation operated out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. So we all assembled together as a cast and crew for the first time in Minneapolis. It was in September of 2006. This was a brand new show for them. They had never produced a My Little Pony live show before. They had never constructed costumes costumes of the sort that were going to be in this show. So it was really a new experience for everyone. It was definitely a new experience for a lot of the performers. I think outside of maybe a couple of people in the cast who had worked with V before, it was a lot of people like myself who were pretty green out of college, had not done much professionally before. So we were all kind of getting our feet wet with this type of thing for the first time.
So I was 19 and I had never worked professionally. So I didn't know anything. I had never toured. I had never truly worked professionally. So I didn't actually think I would get it. So I didn't have, I would have to plan for leaving school or what touring would be like or what a live children's show would be like. I didn't know.
I come from a family that is in education, and so I kind of gravitate towards children, always have. I actually work in an elementary school now. I was easily attracted to the idea of children's theater because I thought it married my love of working with kids and providing entertainment as well as performing, so it kind of gave me the best of all the worlds I enjoyed.
I didn't think too much about what I was getting into because I had just made this leap to move to Minnesota where I knew nobody. Because I had just gone through that and experienced that, and I was still somewhat fresh out of college, like a few years at this point, there was never really any anxiety. It was just like, well, I've done this before. It's going to be different. Like, I was just open to it.
Doing live shows was always my passion. I was a kindergarten teacher for a private school, and I just love children. And so the thing I didn't realize is that you never get to work with children. Unless your show has children, you are working with, adults 18 to 26, basically.
The rehearsal process was also so much faster than you might think that it was, especially when you consider the fact that actors were coming from all over the country and had to be flown in. What I would give to spend a day in one of those rehearsal rooms and just see the process of this show evolving.
The rehearsal process was ran by basically the corporate headquarters. They had a whole costume shop that would make the costumes and rehearse, and the producer was there, the director was there, the choreographer was there, and so the company manager would sit in the office and just prep for the tour.
We started blocking it as you would block any sort of theater production. They were giving us a general description of what our costumes were going to be like, so we were trying to use posture and movement like we thought would work once we had the costumes on, but we didn't see the costumes really at all for the first, I would say, at least week or two that we were performing on the show.
The ponies themselves were actually built to us as people. So we got fitted for costumes, tried on our feet, because it's all puppeteering and meching and learning how to mech. Meching itself is when your hand is in the mouth and you're talking with the mouth.
Everything was just taped out on a floor, and I think we were using just an empty arena in Minneapolis at the time, but we didn't have any of our sets. We were just working sort of in a blank space of a room, all just ourselves in rehearsal clothes, hearing the tracks so we could hear what our voices were going to sound like, our characters' voices were going to sound like, we could hear the music. At that point, we didn't really know fully what to expect till a couple of weeks in when we flew down to Des Moines, Iowa, and that's where we saw the sets for the first time. That's where we started to get a feel for the costumes.
And really experience what the backstage is like, because that's also important for a show like this.
And of course, if you're someone joining the cast a little further along in the tour, you can't expect them to wait for you to catch up. With multiple shows happening every single week, none of which can be canceled, these performers had to adapt to tour life unbelievably quickly.
So I was cast to join the second tour of it all. So slowly they brought us in, usually one or two replacements at a time. But I joined them in one of the Florida cities, and I remember being picked up at the airport by our manager, brought and got to see the end of a show, and I was like, woo, kind of like caught by all the glimmer. And then immediately started rehearsals the next day with our production director and one other cast member who she also played a ladybug, and she did both tours with us.
I think that was the thing I was the most ill prepared for, was trying to pick up the choreography and the blocking in such a small amount of time, because any other show I'd been a part of, you have this whole rehearsal process. A lot of these performers, they've done the show time and time again, so it's like the back of their hand already. And it's not just your body doing the dance moves, it's your body with this apparatus. And it's like you just have to be hyper aware of so many more things.
I had about a day and a half, I think, to kind of learn it. And then When we traveled to the next city, I got thrown in on stage for a pre-rehearsal. You slowly put on parts of the costume, marked through it, and then next thing you know, I was in the show.
Now, if you know anything about me, you probably know that I love puppets. And I'm not ignorant of the fact that that's likely one of the reasons this show has stuck with me for so long. I am obsessed with puppets, and I have seen kids of all ages interact with puppets of all different shapes and sizes. All of that is to say, I'm not particularly surprised that this show's legacy is largely defined by its character design, something that also tends to be the most controversial thing about its run. When reading reviews, the thing most people who didn't like the show were complaining about were the puppets, calling them scary or unsettling. Quote, "Again, the kids seem to be having a great time, and providing your impressionable youngster won't get creeped out by the sight of her beloved two-dimensional animated pony pals suddenly transforming into real-life versions of surreal terror, there's a solid chance they'll be smiling and mumbling through the lyrics, and demanding with some vigor that you take them to the next My Little Pony show. Or else." The costumes have a rather ugly and surrealist look to them. If I'd seen those 15 years earlier, I probably would have been freaked out. Creepy and scary. This is the live show I will never watch again. Too creepy and scary. The show must go on. This can be nightmare fuel for some, but thanks to this, we now have some memes with this weird show. It should be noted that all of these reviews were for the filmed version of the show that they released on DVD, not from people who actually saw the show live. I had a really difficult time finding reviews from actual audience members, and I wonder how seeing it live may have negated some of these issues. After all, these costumes were designed to be seen by thousands of children at a time in a massive arena. Seeing a pony from the back row of a stadium is a very different experience from seeing it blown up on your TV screen. Of course, there are some things about these puppets that differ from their on-screen counterparts. Their faces are a bit wider and their eyes are further apart. The seams, especially on their legs, are pretty dramatic, and with sagging fabric and hooves that hover, I can understand why people might find these unsettling, especially if this is their first exposure to full-body puppets or mascot suits.
You might also notice when looking at these puppets that their pupils are centered in the center of their actual eyes, as opposed to having a more cross-eyed look that's pretty common with puppets and animated characters. So for example, if we take this puppet that I've made, you can see that her pupils are centered on her actual face, as opposed to centered in her eyes. And this is common for a lot of reasons. The biggest is that it helps give a character a singular eye line, as opposed to two separate eye lines going in two separate directions. And this helps with things like eye contact, with giving your character a distinct focus, and it also helps avoid that uncanny valley feeling you get when you can't really tell what a character is looking at. A character should be able to look directly into the camera because it should have a distinct enough eye line. Of course, there are always exceptions. My favorite Muppet, Scooter, has his pupils in the middle of his eyes, but the vast majority of puppets are going to have that cross-eyed look for the reasons that I previously listed. Even the animated versions of the Generation 3 ponies have slightly crossed eyes. And so I think what might be scaring people about the pony puppets in My Little Pony Live isn't just how far away the eyes are, but how they can appear to be looking in different directions, and because there's so much white space between the center of their face and their pupils, it makes the eyes look like they're even farther apart than they are. It's a very tiny detail, but I do think it makes a big difference. But of course, I might be biased because that's something that I do with all of my puppets. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. We'll talk more about how the puppets actually work in a second, but from my interviews, I quickly learned that a lot of the design elements people were complaining about were essential elements for the puppet's ability to function at all. These puppets don't just have to look good. A performer has to be able to get in and out of them easily and efficiently. A performer has to fit inside of them. They have to be light enough for someone to carry for over an hour at a time while performing. They have to be durable enough to survive being transported across the country over the course of nearly 3 years. And some of these things are only possible because the back two legs hover. Because there's a seam somewhere, because the heads are large enough to fill the entire upper body of an adult performer. I don't think people are wrong for feeling unease or even disappointment, but I do think a lot of those feelings are to be expected regardless of how accurate a full body suit may or may not be.
As someone who has worked as both a mascot and a mascot handler at various children's experiences, I can assure you that a child getting scared or crying or hiding behind their grown-up's legs is all very common. So common that it rarely phases the people actually working in these industries. While the context of my experiences is obviously a little different, I do think there's probably a lot of overlap when it comes to what a child might be thinking or feeling. It can be scary to see your favorite characters three-dimensional for the first time ever and 4 times as big as you. It can inspire, for lack of better words, big emotions. Emotions that may or may not be quite similar to seeing the puppet you're about to be trapped inside of for the next 2 years of your life, if you're a performer.
I do remember seeing the ponies for the very first time. It was startling. I was sitting in the rehearsal hall. I knew that they were coming up from behind, and I turned around and saw one approaching, and it startled me. I was like, oh my gosh.
Seeing the costumes for the first time was unreal, and putting those costumes on for the first time was really unlike anything I think I had ever experienced before, and I don't think I've experienced anything like it since.
We are all the same height because the costumes had to fit a certain type of body, and they were looking for performers that were 5'5" and a strong athletic build. And I was like, that's the first time I've ever gone to a dance audition where they were looking for a strong athletic build, and I was like, done. Soon find out why, because the costumes were just, I mean, they were comfortable, but they were a beast.
I had no puppeteering experience prior to this show. I learned on the go. I thought it was really cool that, a costume is literally being built for me. They're very well made. They're extremely, probably very expensive costumes. And I also was just like, I don't want to break it. It was daunting and exciting at the same time.
Because we had understudies. So when we came on, the understudies were in for the characters that we were going to play. I just remember being in awe of how seamlessly they moved around each other and how animated they were. Back then, I don't know, the internet was just different. I didn't think to go to YouTube and see and look for people videoing. It wasn't like I could scroll through TikTok and find videos of the show. My first experience was just when I showed up.
Kate's experience as a member of the wardrobe department and as a recent graduate was also fascinating.
Actually, in I think my junior year of college, in my costume design class, we had gone to the Costumes and Creatures workshop there, and they were in the prototype phase of developing the pony costumes. They were a little uglier at that stage of development than they ended up being. So we talked to the designers and, got to see the prototypes. And I don't think anything else of it after that. I had no idea I'd be working with those.
I asked her what the biggest differences were between the prototype versions and the versions we saw on stage. And this is what she said.
They were bigger, as I recall. I feel like the faces were a little rounder. I would have watched the show my first day, whenever the first show was when I came on in Charleston. So that was my first time seeing everything.
So how do the costumes work? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because this is the first time this information is going to be released anywhere online, and I am beyond excited to get to be the person to share it with you.
We were the full pony. There was no front end and back end.
You would put on a pair of pants, I guess you would call it, that were essentially the front legs of the pony.
The shoes were built in, the shoes zipped onto the bottom of the pants. Their dance tennis shoes were attached inside of there.
And then the crew would come and they would help hook on this whole harness system.
A backpack that was made out of a foam that you could heat form specifically for each dancer as best as you could.
So it was comfortably on our shoulders and then around and would sit on our hips.
And then attached to the backpack was sort of this metal exoskeleton is kind of the best way I can think of to describe it.
And there was a bar that kind of went against our lumbar that equally distributed the weight of the back end of the pony throughout kind of our whole body. And so that it wasn't putting any strain really on one part of the body. It wasn't it was dragging on your shoulders or on your hips too much. It was very well made to make us as comfortable as possible.
There were little hooks on the back of each of our legs that hooked within the torso, I believe, that connected to the back legs.
So whenever we cooked our actual legs, the back ones appeared to be moving.
That whole back part of the costume, in the early part of production, I think it weighed close to 50 pounds. And they quickly realized as we started working through rehearsals that that was not going to work weight-wise, so they tried to shed some weight from it here and there. But it had a metal frame, it had a lot of padding, it had a lot of stuff going on inside it with different mechanisms to try to make those back legs move. So it was pretty heavy.
And then once we were in that harness, they would lower the head onto us.
And then the head of the pony would fit on top of essentially from your head all the way down to about chest level.
There was a bar to manipulate the mouth. I was told after the first kind of crew did a year of this that it was easier to just put your hand in the bottom jaw to make it move.
So my torso is in the head, so in terms of how the eyes moved. I don't know exactly where they were attached on the eyes, on the back of the eyes, but it was like a string with a ball that kind of sat probably right below my chin, and I could see out this little screen, and one hand was on the ball at all times and one hand was in the mouth.
And like you could manipulate the eyes where you could like squint, like only close them halfway.
They were attached. It was like a V. So it was a ball that was connecting both of them. So I could blink if I pulled on the ball and both eyes would close. And then if I pulled on one side would close and the other side would close.
So it was always fun to like run to the stage and like look at a kid and then just wink at them. Your face is right here and you're looking out the widow's peak. And then you kind of rested your elbows in the cheeks so that like you could like move the head. But it was also funny in rehearsal when we weren't in costume because it was just a bunch of people running around stage like this.
So the head was puppetry, the bottom was like part costume, part machine.
The costumes were innovative, the way they made them, the way they worked. I'd never seen anything like it, and I was really proud to be a part of it.
I truly cannot describe to you how ecstatic I was to finally learn how these puppets worked. Obviously, I was actively interviewing these performers, so I kept a very calm, cool, and collected demeanor, but internally, I was bouncing off the walls. Because these puppets are so specific to this show, I wanted to know what elements caused the most issues, what had to be repaired and what had to be adjusted as these puppets made their way across the country.
It wasn't a chain, but that's what's coming to my head that we called it, with the eyeball chain or rope or whatever. That would come undone, so you would have to rethread that quickly. The fleece could rip or just get worn. The shoes, if they drug too much, would wear off the bottom of the soles. Most of the time, though, it was just trying to make micro adjustments to make the dancers as comfortable as possible. Like, they were big costumes. Things could be adjusted even just like a little tiny bit, and it would throw the weight off and be extremely uncomfortable or painful for the dancers. You know, they would come off and be like, it's really heavy here, it really hurts here or whatever. So then, you know, going in there and trying to adjust whatever it was to make the weight be more comfortably distributed on the dancers.
This means that the silly little malfunction clip that I started this video with,
malfunction,
likely wasn't a malfunction at all, just someone being silly inside the costume. There was nothing robotic about it to malfunction. Every movement was done by the performers, using powerless and batteryless mechanisms. How freaking cool is that? And while the ladybugs aren't quite as complex, they are still intricately crafted and home to some incredible performers.
So you started with a full black unitard that had a headpiece too. Our costume, kind of like a giant dress that you stepped into and zipped up. And then our physical arms and legs were our own body. That was just in our black unitard. And then we had really big kind of like Mickey Mouse style gloves, little like pink Mary Jane sneaker type style shoes. The heads are almost like a helmet style. And then you place it on and you have a chin strap that wraps around to hold it in. And then you saw actually out of the mouth. So that was definitely one of the hardest parts to get used to. The rest of the body wasn't hard, but you know, you have a much wider head and then you're seeing through a tiny little hole here. So that was probably the biggest struggle for me. There was this little picture of our characters. So I'm actually the one in the middle. I got to put on the Miranda head during the Teapot song.
And of course, at the end of every show, these ponies had to be packed up and brought to the next location.
They each had their own crate. So the show had 3 semis, which I think is actually kind of low for, you know, these bigger shows. And each pony had their own big old crate. was very tall, as wide as the pony, and it fit in there, and the head would kind of rest on top. A decent amount of time we called them pubs or publicity, where it would be one dancer and then like the dance captain, and then one of the costumers would go to basically do like an early morning news shoot at absolute ass o'clock in the morning. And so then we had basically huge duffel bags that one pony costume could be broken down and fit in.
But that's just the puppets. The logistics of touring a show all over the country is fascinating to me. And the more I talked to people, the more I was baffled by just how much work was required to make this production possible.
When I first started, I would get my schedule from the booking department. The booking department would ship me the itinerary and say, hey, you're going to be at this arena, and you're going to need to load in, and you're going to need to load out, and you're going to need a hotel, and you're going to need rental cars, you're going to need transportation to get there from this previous city. And that's where I would start.
We had were called full weeks and split weeks. I was never on a tour that did 3 different cities in a week, which I'm super grateful, but it's not unheard of. A full week meant we were sitting down in one city for the entire week. A split week meant 2 cities, and they were often close to each other, so there wasn't a lot of travel in between.
We would bus a good portion of the time. If it was a further distance, we would fly.
A lot of our time traveling was dependent on the crew and how much time the crew needed off due to like union rules. In a full week, typically we would get to the hotel on like a Monday.
The company would put us up in hotels. There was sort of a trade-off there where the company would pay for a portion of our hotel stay, and the rest would come out of a per diem stipend that we had part of our contracts. But all of the hotels that we stayed in were really nice hotels, especially for young 20-year-old kids right out of college.
Usually Tuesday was off
because that was when the crew was loading in the show.
You're going to hear the terms load in and load out a lot in this section. In case you're unfamiliar, load in is the process of unpacking, assembling, and loading the show into the theater. And load out is the process of disassembling everything, loading it out of the theater, and packing it up to transport to the next location. These elements of the shows aren't just rolled in on wheels, they have to be entirely reassembled at every single location. Lights have to be set up in the rigging systems. Even something as simple as a props table has to be placed there by somebody. And with a cast of giant pony puppets, it was vital that the backstage area was just as organized as what was happening on stage.
Then sometimes there's Wednesday rehearsals.
If we played a theater versus like an arena, sometimes the theater stage was like smaller than our typical stage. And so we would just have to work through some like small blocking changes and run a few numbers just so that we were aware of the smaller stage.
Typically Thursdays started your shows, and you have Thursday, Friday, usually 2 shows Saturday, and usually 2 shows Sundays. Occasionally there would be 3 shows on the weekends in each days.
So on a split week, you would travel Monday, they would load in Tuesday morning, and we'd sometimes have a show Tuesday night, but usually definitely 2 shows on Wednesday. They would load out, we would travel Thursday, they would load in Friday morning, we'd have a show Friday night, and then Saturday, Sunday. And so those were a little bit more intense.
We toured everywhere from actually even outside the US. I remember we went to Mississauga, Canada, to Lubbock, Texas. I mean, we went everywhere.
I think we were in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we were like, let's go to New Orleans for a day.
We had an opportunity to perform in Hollywood, and we saw all the sights there. We performed in Madison Square Garden in New York. We were able to do all of the fun touristy things in New York City. So we toured some really small places too. We were in all kinds of really small towns in the Midwest. We always made the most of wherever we were, and everyone was up for just sightseeing and just immersing ourselves in whatever sort of region of the country that we were in.
All my extended family is very spread out around the country, so it was really fun to, in some cities, some families members would come and see me perform. My now husband, but then boyfriend would come out and see me perform and visit, and we would get to explore the cities. My own parents would travel to a couple of cities to see too. I amazingly kept what's called our triptychs.
It had, the name of the hotel and places to eat and all the different details for us as a cast and a crew.
I worked for the National Guard for a while. I just left there and I'm moving to a new job. But when I interviewed for that position, I had absolutely zero military experience. So I'm not from a military family. And I talked about the My Little Pony thing. And they were like, well, it sounds like a military unit. I'm like, Yeah, probably in some ways.
As interesting as all of this is, it's very logistical. I wanted to know how these people were able to find a work-life balance while eating, sleeping, traveling, sightseeing, and performing all day, every day, with the same 30 people. These people being their coworkers that they likely met on their first day of rehearsal. How do you take care of your body? How do you take care of your mental health? How do you allow yourself a sense of individuality separate from your role as a member of this team?
Tour life itself is fun and exciting, especially as a younger person, and it could also be very exhausting.
The costumes were heavy, they were bulky, they were a lot to carry around for a 90-minute live show, and especially we were sometimes doing 2 or even 3 shows a day on the days of our performances. So it definitely required us to make sure that while we were having fun and making the most of our touring experience, we were also keeping ourselves in good physical shape, that we were working out, that we were taking dance classes, that we were making sure that we were doing stretches and whatever we needed in terms of recovery for our bodies so that we were ready to go for when the shows came along.
I looked at it more as like taking care of myself, as if I was like a linebacker putting on my pads putting on my pads every game and having to go out there. You knew what your limitations were once you got that costume on. You couldn't really push it.
I would take any opportunity, even if we were just in a city for a couple days, to just like walk around even like the hotel area, just to try to breathe in fresh air.
When you're on the road, it's like times 10. If you're on the road for a year, you've known these people for 10 years. You live with them, you eat with them, you breathe with them, you perform with them, you fight with them, you love them. They become your family.
I think that actually helped in the experience, is that we all were in the same boat. We got to lean on each other a lot, so that was really helpful, and I made some really good friends.
I also learned that in some cases, this bond lasted long after the show closed.
Like some of like my closest friends, even if we don't talk all the time, because we spent that year together, like I still consider them like some of my best friends. Like I have best friends all over the country now.
We always say it stinks that we can't see each other that much anymore, but they're all very supportive. This group also too, this is getting a little personal, but I was diagnosed with cancer in January, and they all kind of came together and really supported me and inspired me, sent a lot of fun and love for me, sent me care packages.
We toured over like almost 20 years ago, I think now. I don't even know. Almost. It's close. And like there was no hesitation. There was no, like everyone's like, what do we gotta do? What do we need to do? What does she need? Does she need this? People are sending ideas. Like, let's send her that. Like, and it was the whole group. You know what I mean? It was like no one batted an eye to help a member of this little family.
They even sent me little tiny My Little Pony figurines and had my girls hide them around the room on like my chemo days and stuff like that to, kind of bring me smiles, and it does. And so now above my dresser, I have all the little ponies lined up. And so even before coming down to talk to you, I kind of smiled because I was like, oh, they're all with me right there.
We might just be a little small community of her whole world, but we want to show her that like you're part of this community and you still matter. And that was an experience. That wasn't just a job. Like that was like our life.
So I think it's just that this has made an impact on my life that I'll carry with me forever.
And I was also told that this video essay that you're watching right now inspired a mini virtual reunion among many members of the cast and crew, as they chatted about their interviews, as they reminisced on their time as part of this production, and gossiped about the video essay in general, which was such a crazy thing to hear as the person who is putting so much time and energy into this video. And I suppose even then, it's all worth it to get to tour the country and do the thing that you love, especially when show days have been almost scientifically refined.
So typically show days would vary depending on how many shows we were doing in a day. If we were just doing one show in the evening, we would usually have a call time, I think about 2 hours before the show.
What time would we be called actually? Let's see. Oh, at like 4 o'clock, between 3 and 4-ish.
And we would all have sort of set things that we needed to do ahead of time.
So we kind of go over the blocking and any notes that were maybe given from the week before that they were like, hey, we want to clean this up or change this up. You would definitely go and check that all your materials and props were ready.
You would have everything set up before you went in. Depending on where we were in the rotation, there would maybe be laundry. Laundry was my responsibility.
Then usually you had a little bit of downtime beforehand, and then you would start getting ready for the show.
We all had certain attire that we wore underneath our costumes that we had to get into. We all had different stretching routines that we would do ahead of time.
There was a few of us who did push-up challenges before each show. Under the costume, we would wear a unitard. And so you would just see a bunch of people in like black unitards just doing push-ups on the stage.
And then about a half an hour before the show, we would get a call down to backstage. That's when we would start getting into the front leg part of our costumes.
For the ladybugs, since I said like it was like a helmet style, you would go and put in your new chin strap because they would always be freshly laundered. You would make sure your helmet fit and snug because you could put like foam pieces in to keep it tight. And then the show would begin and the fun would begin.
Everyone had their own track. So there were certain props I would take or give out, certain cues, like things I would pull, that kind of thing. Making sure the ponies had what they needed. We're assisted coming off and on, but yeah, you just did the show.
On a 2 or 3 show day, those would be your Saturdays and Sundays. You usually got there pretty early. You did the same thing of a quick call. We tended to usually hang out in between each shows and just you brought your own snacks or lunches. Occasionally we might have something delivered.
We would make sure to rest and hydrate in between. Some people took naps, relax there, and then do the other show, and just making sure our bodies were fueled physically and nutritionally.
You had your intermission, and then at the end of the show, you had to make sure everything was set up for the next day if you were still performing. Or if it was a loadout show, you had to pack all your props up.
The show encompassed many, many, many people that were not on the road. There were dozens and dozens of people and support staff in home office and in what we called Costumes and Creatures, or we called the shop, you might have heard it as the shop, that supported us and did everything. We needed another lights, or if we needed bulbs, or if we needed electrical cables, or we had a question about the contract, or marketing people. There were literally, for every performer, there was probably 2 or 3 support staff.
A few extra bonus things that I learned were that there were actually 2 performers who played Pinkie Pie. Because the character was on the stage the longest, it was split among 2 performers. One person would take one half of the show, and one person would take the other half of the show, so that each of them could have a bit of a break. The actors who played the ladybugs played all of the silly little miscellaneous characters you see, like the fairies or the butterflies.
Oh, yes! You remember the lip... Oh my gosh.
Well, I have the DVD, so I just watched it recently.
Yeah, so these little guys, is that what you're thinking? Yeah. At the very beginning of the show, when some of the ponies were kind of running around excited, there was like little butterflies we did from the side. See, you're bringing everything back to me now, too.
And similar to being in a Broadway production, the performers could actually talk to each other on stage because the sound system was so loud.
Because when we were on stage, we could talk to each other. Like, the audience couldn't hear us over the sound. So there were times that we'd be like, hey, like, your eye stopped blinking. You gotta go off stage. They'd be like, okay.
They also stayed in stalls, backstage, horse stalls, stables during the show.
All of the ponies had what we referred to as stalls backstage, where the back leg portion of our costumes were kept in. So when it was almost time for the show to start, we would all have to go up to our stalls, which were in the wings off stage. And that's where they would get us harnessed in. They would put our heads over us. And once we were in those costumes, other than when it was intermission in the show, we had to stay in those costumes the entire time, which meant we couldn't come down from the stage. We would have to stay off in the wings. So the stalls that they had our costumes in were also fashioned with a bicycle seat. So when we were off stage, when our characters were not on stage, that was the only place we would go. So we would come to our stall, we would sit down on the bicycle seat to be able to give us some rest from the weight of the costume. We would sometimes hook up fans if it was really hot backstage. We would clip a fan onto our stall to be able to give us a little bit of airflow. We would maybe be able to pop our head up if we had a long enough break. Otherwise, we would just sort of sit there. So, we were really very much like horses in stalls off stage when we were not actually on stage performing.
Now you might be thinking, Aidan, we're 30 minutes into this video, and you still haven't told us what My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party, is even about. Okay, strap in, because this is the fastest summary that I can muster. Though I do recommend just watching the full show on YouTube. It's fun! Also probably significantly shorter than this video essay. I'll leave a link to it in the description box down below.
My little pony, my little pony. Now, sing with me. My little pony, my little pony.
My Little Pony Live opens with Spike the Dragon, giving a brief introduction to the show and explaining the theater etiquette of this particular production. Throughout the entire show, the audience is treated like active members in the story. The fourth wall is non-existent, and kids are encouraged to clap, dance, wave their hands around, sing along, and laugh. I imagine that this made a lot of kids in the audience feel really special. Finally, the Generation 3 theme song begins, and the ponies arrive! This takes us straight into a song called Good Morning Ponyville, which is all about saying good morning to Ponyville.
It's time to say good morning, Ponyville. Good morning!
But perhaps more importantly, it takes the time to introduce most of the characters by name, which I imagine is helpful not only for people who aren't die-hard My Little Pony fans, but also for kids who might be having a hard time recognizing characters in this new medium. The ponies are questioning what they should do that day, to which Pinkie Pie promises that she will find a way for them to do literally every fun thing ever in one day. And since no one understands the gravity of this logistical nightmare, they just leave her alone to figure out how they can bake sweets and dress up and roller skate and ride in a hot air balloon and Spike tells Pinkie Pie she might be a little in over her head, to which Pinkie Pie's like, dude, relax. I just gotta squink and everything will be fine. And then because squinking is not a real word, they sing a whole song explaining what squinking is. And all that squinking inspires Pinkie Pie to plan the world's biggest tea party. She tells all the other ponies about her plan and everyone is understandably on board because come on, that sounds pretty awesome. The only issue is calling the world's biggest tea party the world's biggest tea party. It doesn't actually make it any easier to organize. Rarity offers to host at her place, Pinkie Pie promises to bring the tea and the teapot, and the rest of the ponies start delegating different tasks, like making invitations, baking sweets, decorating, etc., stuff like that. Except for Minty, who never actually assigns herself a role, which to be fair, Minty's main personality trait is being clumsy, and I guess you can't trust clumsy girls around fine china. I mean, I don't mean to point fingers, but we all remember what happened at Christmas time, Minty.
And it'll be... Do-over. Do-over.
Anyway, the rest of the ponies are locked in. They're so locked in that they sing an entire song about making invitations. Now, there's a rule in musical theater that when you can no longer speak, you must sing, and when you can no longer just sing, you must dance. And as someone who has gone crazy making Canva infographics, I really actually do believe that this deserved its own musical number. I really think that it was viscerally inspired by a real human experience. Because guys, graphic design gets really intense sometimes. It really does. I make my friends make my thumbnails for me. Anyway, they create a giant invitation and boom, blackout. That's intermission. Act 2 opens with some audience interaction utilizing these paper teacups. Meanwhile, the ponies are panicking about what to wear to the tea party, and I'm panicking about all the time we're wasting picking out outfits. Pinkie Pie ensures the audience that everyone is working diligently on their tasks for the tea party, which I'm pretty sure I just saw half of them slacking off at a disco, but okay, whatever. She also asks Rarity if she started working on the very important streamers, and Rarity's like, no, I haven't. And Pinkie Pie's like, oh my god, you're so silly. Streamers? Check. Which, no, they're not check, Pinkie Pie. You need to hold your friends accountable. Then in the next scene, they're packing up a hot air balloon to go to the tea party because, that's right, they invited everyone to this party this morning, and it is a destination tea party. You have to travel by air. This is fake criticism, by the way. I'm joking. Do not think that this is actual judgment of this show for 5-year-olds. While they're packing, they ask Rarity where the streamers are, and she's like, you guys, I've literally never done anything wrong. I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl, and I can't be expected to make streamers in these conditions. I just want to have fun. And everyone's like,
Rarity, have you considered that helping your friends is fun? And she's like, oh my god, yes, you're so right. I still don't have the streamers though. But it doesn't matter. We take the hot air balloon to Rarity's house, we arrive, and it is time for the tea party. Everything has gone according to plan, and all that's left to do is drink some tea and celebrate. But then, disaster strikes. Pinkie Pie forgot the teapot. And, get this, also the tea. She forgot the tea for the world's biggest tea party. Pinkie Pie is devastated. She spent so much time worrying about other people's jobs that she forgot to keep her own promise. Luckily, Minty is there and she's used to causing issues, so she comforts Pinkie Pie, reminding her that she's not alone, that we all make mistakes, and if the ponies of Ponyville can put up with Minty 24/7, they can handle the first ever mistake made by Pinkie Pie. And then they horse kiss. I mean, they kiss their horses. I mean, they nuzzle their mouths together. Could also be a horse equivalent of a hug. I don't know, I'm not a horse. I can interpret it as a lesbian love ballad if I want to. I mean, the critics sure did.
I love you, Pinkie Pie. I love you too, Minty.
Everyone forgives Pinkie Pie and they decide that they can just have a regular party instead of a tea party. Because after all, it is friendship that matters most. But not to Pinkie Pie. We are getting that freaking tea. With the help of Spike and some awesome audience interaction, everyone recites a poem that summons a giant pot of tea, and the day is saved. The ponies restate all the lessons they learned, thank the audience, and curtain call. The show is over. And honestly, it's fun. It's pretty much exactly what you would expect from something like this. Basic plot lines that tie together a bunch of songs, or at least melodies that already exist. It definitely relies a lot on the novelty of seeing these characters on stage for the first time, as opposed to really developing a story that can stand on its own for a full hour. For me, whether it's because I'm watching it alone on my laptop instead of in a packed theater, or because I am 23 years old and definitely not the target demographic for this show, that novelty wore off pretty quickly. The show very clearly prioritizes music over conflict or character development, with a lot of the main messages and themes of the show being crammed into the last 5 minutes. And obviously this is a show written for kids, but plenty of kids shows have well-developed characters, interesting plot lines, and age-appropriate conflict. And I think because My Little Pony lacks those things, it also lacks rewatchability. Which, to be fair, isn't really an issue if it's a touring show you're seeing once when it comes to your state, but it is an issue if you're me and you have the DVD and you're writing a 45-minute video essay about it. 45 minutes was a actually embarrassingly optimistic estimate of how long this video was going to be.
There's just a lot of fluff. It's fun fluff, but it's still fluff. Act 2 loses a lot of its momentum because it simply runs out of story to tell. The plot isn't complicated enough to fill an hour. Still, the music is catchy, and despite their controversial design, the puppets are brimming with life. They move with an impressive amount of energy despite being so bulky. And I really appreciate how dedicated all the performers were to their characters' physicality.
These were characters that kids knew from TV shows and movies. They all had very distinct personalities to them, and so the production team really wanted those personalities to show through. Rainbow Dash was in particular a very girly girl pony, very much had sort of like a Zsa Zsa Gabor kind of personality to her. There was a very distinct type of movement that was required to really embody that type of role. And so that was something that took some practice on my part with some coaching from the folks behind the scenes.
Specifically speaking about the ponies, we were the original cast, so we got to put who we were into the ponies as well. There wasn't a lot of like character development, but there was a lot of looking into like what is our job in the town, and specifically for me being Sweetberry, who owns the sweet shop, I think that she might eat a lot of cupcakes, or I personally as Alyssa is an excitable person, and so I think I brought a lot of that. She's a little bit more chipper, she's a little bit more bouncy than maybe the other ponies.
It was really fun because you got to really play with it a little bit. You had very specific details of what they wanted you to do, but then at the same time, you got to create your own little version and character of it. And so I tended to be more of the cutesy, little wavy, mischievous ladybug. I think that the ponies had more restrictions because they had a very certain types of character roles that they were playing, but the ladybugs got to have a little bit more fun and be playful. And since there was 3 of us, we really played off of each other and fed off of it too, and helped develop the little details of it all.
I really liked the audience interaction, especially the part that used a free piece of merchandise that every kid gets to take home. And the encouragement kids were given to laugh, clap, dance, and sing along was really refreshing. This is a show who knows who it's for and is not afraid to tailor the environment in which the show is happening to better fit that target demographic. This is also less about the live show and more about the recording, but I really love how often it cuts to children in the audience. I think that helps emulate the feeling of watching it with other people, since theater is, of course, a communal experience, but it also reminds us that the audience is its own character, and I thought that was really sweet. Do I think My Little Pony Live is the best show ever? No, probably not. Do I think it's as bad as reviewers claim that it is? Also no. And even though I agree with a lot of the criticism from these reviews, especially criticism about the pacing, I think a lot of them were posted by people who simply would have never liked My Little Pony Live, no matter how good it was. I don't think getting mad that the other ponies forgave Pinkie Pie at the end is valid criticism for a show written for 5-year-olds. You can criticize the show as much as you want, I just think you have to be at least somewhat cognizant of the genre and target audience of the thing that you're criticizing. Is the show childish? Sure, it's written for children. And of course, a lot of the criticism surrounded the pony puppets, but we've already covered that. As someone who tries to be, like, a little bit funny in my pop culture commentary videos, I understand that a My Little Pony stage show might seem like low-hanging fruit, but I want to make it abundantly clear, in case for some reason I haven't already, that I have so much respect for My Little Pony Live. I don't think that My Little Pony Live is a perfect show, and I think it would be disingenuous for me to pretend like I do when I've dedicated so much time and energy to presenting the truth in every other aspect of this video, but I do know the internet. And so I'm going to say right here and right now that these critiques come from like a genuine place of love for this craft, for this show, for this art form, for this industry, and like a super deep understanding of the importance of this type of theater. And that's a big reason why I wanted to make this video, so that this show could be remembered as something more than just something bronies complain about every few months when they stumble across the footage like archaeologists discovering the first T-Rex. So it could be remembered as a hub for incredibly talented performers, with a legacy that likely inspired hundreds, if not thousands, of future theater goers and makers. But we'll get into that. First, we have to talk about capitalism. Of course, the symbiotic relationship between toys and television does not magically disappear when the TV is replaced by stage lights and a golden proscenium. For if you are a young child who donned your Sunday best, obediently strapped yourself into your car seat, and spent the better part of your afternoon serving your duties as a patron of the arts, it is to be expected that you will return home clutching a small plastic pony in your fists. A symbol of what is very likely your first exposure to the theatrical arts, and a way to bring that art home with you.
Just like any good show, My Little Pony had merch. We had an entire merch team that traveled with us to every single city, so we had setups out in the lobbies for all of these shows where you could buy little plushies, you could buy light up wands. Again, it just added to sort of the rock concert mystique of a My Little Pony Live performance when you would have everybody holding up their Pinkie Pie pink light up wands and all of the other good stuff that parents were good sports and purchased for their kids before they came in to see the show.
And thank you to the glorious Wayback Machine, I can read you a description of those merch stands directly from the My Little Pony Live website. Quote, "There are souvenir stands. Some families choose to purchase a souvenir of the experience, and some do not. The cost of products range from $5 to $25. Something that really stood out to me was, one, how relatively cheap the merchandise was. I mean, $5 is pretty good for a piece of merch from a live show. I've been to many concerts in my time, and You can't really get anything for $5. And 2, I really love how the paragraphs specify that some families don't buy merchandise. For more information on the specific products sold at the show, the My Little Pony wiki had this photo of one of the merchandise stands. For the most part, there isn't anything particularly surprising about the merchandise lineup. It's pretty standard for both My Little Pony and live shows in general. You can get t-shirts, plushies of some of the more popular characters, balloons, activity books, posters, and non-specific cotton candy. I had a lot of fun getting to show the cast and crew the pieces of merch that I have from when I saw the show, including my teacup.
I think Tim actually said that you pulled this out, that you had one of these as well.
Oh my gosh, I have a couple of those downstairs. I love it.
Oh, that is so cute.
Hey, there it is. Those things were such a pain in the butt. Oh my goodness.
Tell me more about that.
We ordered, it had to be 50,000 of them. And then I think a whole bunch got lost and we had to do another reorder. And it was just like this big pain in the butt. We'd get to places where the ushers weren't allowed to hand out things because of the union or something. And so we had to hire people to hand out the teacups to people. I have fond memories of those damn teacups.
And they showed me some of the merch that they kept or collected as well.
Oh my gosh. I actually just found the other day a bunch of copies of these, and I was going to give these to my next door neighbor because I was like, I don't need multiple copies, but I found Wisteria's Wish, which was my pony back in the day. And then we were at like a dollar store somewhere and I found this. Awesome. It's literally a book about the show.
I mean, I still, as I said, finding things. I had my big, activity program and we all signed actually there's Tim, who you started out with. He signed on his character Rainbow Dash, so we all kind of signed on our characters and wrote messages, so that was fun.
But of course, my favorite pieces of merchandise to read about were the pieces I recognized from my own collection that I got all those years back when I saw the show as a kid. Obviously, I have the DVD, but we'll talk about that later because you couldn't actually buy that at the merch stands. It wasn't released until after the show closed. But I do have this light-up wand that I've taped a microphone to, which is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. The intention was to give kids something they could wave around during the show, similar to what a lot of K-pop groups do today. And I imagine the wands were particularly popular during the moments of audience interaction. I also have this playset based on the live show. Something that's really awesome about this video taking so long is that originally in that footage I talked about how I couldn't find the teacups from my Little Pony Live set, but because it's been 6 months, I was able to go back to my childhood home and I found them. A little teapot, and the other side has a cutesy little tea bag and 2 cutesy little teacups on little saucers. I really love the orange and pink and purple color scheme that was so popular in the early 2000s, and I deeply miss it. And the little saucer has a little spoon that's attached and some cool 3D elements. I also have both of my ponies, so the set came with a Pinkie Pie and a Minty. It came with a little brush so you could brush out the pony hair. That's the one thing that I actually haven't been able to find. But I always braided my pony's hair when I was a kid because I was really scared of it getting super matted and like impossible to untangle. But because of that, their hair's actually in pretty good condition for being a very old toy that I did play with as a very small child. Their heads are articulated. And just like early 2000s Littlest Pet Shops, they have little pink magnets on their feet so you can stick them on the refrigerator, or I used to stick them on the front door of my house. But they're very cutie pie. Cutie pie? Cutie mark. Minty was my favorite because I was so her. Clumsy and annoying. They also sold a picture book based on the live show that came with a CD that would read the book aloud to you, which I thought was really cool. Something that you are taught while learning how to write children's media is that you can't always rely on your audience being able to read. And so I think that was a really nice touch to add that CD. I found an audio recording on YouTube that has a scan of all of the pages as well as the CD playing in the background. I'll leave a link in the description box if you want to check it out, but it's really sweet and it's really cute. Now, despite the fact that you couldn't actually buy it at the merch stand because it wasn't released until after the show closed, I do want to talk a little bit about the My Little Pony Live DVD, because the fact that you could buy a DVD really stood out to me. I think that touring live shows of this type are, or at least were, one of the only forms of live entertainment entertainment where being able to buy a DVD of the event was kind of the norm. Even now, you can easily find professionally recorded versions of Sesame Street Live, Paw Patrol Live, and so many more. Aside from a few rare exceptions, you don't really get that with other forms of live entertainment like touring musicals and plays or concerts. I don't know if it's because the show is for kids, or because they had some sort of deal with Hasbro, or if they just thought it would be cool, but I do know that the DVD has been one of my greatest resources while researching for this video. And if it wasn't for the DVD, I can't imagine how much easier it would have been for this project to be forgotten. It is true that part of theater's magic is that it only exists for one moment before it disappears forever. But that will not stop me in relishing in the rare moments where I actually have archival footage to study. So yeah, I think the DVD is really cool, and I think the process of turning live shows into a video format is an art form all its own that I'm a really big fan of. In 2008, My Little Pony Live had its final performance, and in 2009, Generation 3 came to an end, making way for what would later become the most popular My Little Pony generation to date, Friendship is Magic.
So we did know it was coming to an end. That was a little sad. We did kind of have like a little cast party and little send off and enjoyed the memories and, go down memory lane.
There were rumors that a company in Mexico was maybe interested in buying the show. And so there were some rumors that it was going to be sold and that some people from V were going to go teach them how to set everything up, do the costumes and everything, and then V would be completely hands off. And I just remember a lot of speculation about how difficult that would be without the support of the home office.
I probably have a much different perspective because I'm sure that I knew it was going to close long before anyone else did. I don't really recall when the final announcement was, but I remember it being planned on how we were going to announce it.
I don't recall feeling particularly upset or anything. I just remember thinking that I had so much extremely specific knowledge about something so specific and niche, and it's like, will this ever serve me again in the future?
I think people were probably more surprised that it lasted 2 years than it was closing. It was like, oh, well, surprised it lasted that long. Good job, guys.
While the location of the pony puppets is unknown, the cast and crew confirmed my suspicions that they were probably destroyed, as that often happens when brands don't want such recognizable pieces of iconography to be used outside of their jurisdiction. You see similar things with animatronics at places like Chuck E. Cheese or the Muppet Traffic Safety Show.
It's entirely possible they were destroyed.
Or they were shipped back to Hasbro and Hasbro destroyed them. I know that shortly after My Little Pony closed, they redesigned how the ponies looked. I know that the ponies to Hasbro would have been useless.
They did have some level of storage at Costumes and Creatures, but they're big costumes. It's not just the ponies.
However, rumors have circulated that a retouched version of one of the puppets was used for Twinkle Hope's Rockin' Spa in Give Kids the World Village, a nonprofit in Florida that provides critically ill children and their families with week-long wish vacations at no cost. Twinkle Hope is a character designed specifically for the resort, but upon closer inspection, the mascot looks eerily similar to the Wisteria puppet used in My Little Pony Live, aside from a few cosmetic changes.
I don't know anything about. It's entirely, maybe they bought it from V. It's entirely possible. The wigs on the top buttoned off, so a good indication would be kind of the widow's peak of the pony would be basically painted netting, so they could see. So if she had that would be another tell on the costume that you could look for, but I don't know anything about that. That's funny if there's Wisteria still out there in the world.
Looking at the photos, it does appear as if the widow's peak is made out of mesh. And after our interview, I sent Kate a photo of the Rockin' Spa pony, and this is what she said. Oh man, that is surreal to see. It does look like one of the costumes. I noticed there are wheels on the back legs. Ours did not have wheels, but that was all part of all those micro adjustments with the costume. The back legs just barely hovered off the ground, but each pony was fit to the dancer. So if they are just throwing someone in there to do meet and greets or whatever, it was probably not fit that carefully, and the wheels had to be added. End quote. She also sent the photo to one of the other wardrobe assistants, who later became the head of the wardrobe department, and they also seemed to agree that that was one of their ponies. Of course, it's impossible to actually know for sure, and since then, that mascot has been replaced with an updated version, but if anyone was going to know, it would be those two, and they seem to think it's a pretty safe bet. While there were a few live shows attached to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, it was nothing to the scale of the world's biggest tea party. Instead of performing in packed theaters or arenas, they were usually put on in public parks or shopping malls. However, this is not for lack of trying. There was a Gen 4 show intended to start touring in 2020, performing at 22 locations across 16 states. With Gen 4 ending in 2019 and Gen 5 beginning in 2021, it's my assumption that the intention of the show was to keep My Little Pony relevant during the hiatus between generations. But by the time things started opening up post-pandemic, Gen 5 was well on its way and Generation 4 was already outdated. Which may be why the team chose to cancel it instead of just postponing it like a lot of other live shows had done during the pandemic. Since it was scrapped, there's no way of knowing what the production would have been about, but it should be noted that the writing team for the Friendship is Magic TV show was not involved in the development of the stage show. The biggest clues we have about the plot of the production are the original songs, with lyrics by Jeremy Desmond and music by Jeff Thompson. You can actually listen to the full unreleased soundtrack on SoundCloud for free, link in the description. So while we've yet to see the ponies grace the stage to the same caliber as My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party, we have been blessed with this gem. And of course, with live theater, mistakes like that are bound to happen, even in higher budget productions like My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party.
We had not necessarily understudies, so there was 3 ladybugs, but if we ever needed to, if one of us was sick or injured, we did have a version for 2 of us, and so then we had to quickly adjust to that choreography and staging. And so that would be sometimes when those early rehearsals would be called, because one of my friends did go get hurt in the middle of a show one time. Unfortunately, all 3 of us got sick one time, I remember, in the same city, so that was a little rough too.
And with a show like My Little Pony Live, those mistakes can get very specific.
Absolutely, our legs broke. We would kick too hard or something and this thing would snap.
Because the back ends were hollow, and I think one of the wardrobe people left a wrench or something in the back end. So one of the ponies was like dancing, and all of a sudden this wrench comes flying out of their back end.
Sometimes our hair would, like a piece of hair would fall off, but you know, that happens in real life.
I remember one time turning and I was holding a pony head and there was a dad and his like a very small child standing there because he had found a way backstage and was like, is this what you wanted your kid to see? You wanted her to see a beheaded My Little Pony?
But I do remember one of the ladybug's head fell off in show, in performance, like in front of children. Funny after the fact. Not funny at the time.
I think I've heard stories about it, but yeah, it wasn't with me when I was there. That would be terrifying though.
Thankfully, I can't remember a pony head falling off, because that, talk about scary for the children, that would be frightening.
I was waving at the end of the show and I didn't realize how close I was to like the front, and I just took out all of the footlights.
We had things called bad pony bottles that were exclusively wardrobe. There were three of us on wardrobe, and they were just spray bottles. And if the ponies were like causing mischief backstage, we would spray them like a bad cat. You would spray like up through their mouth so that you could hit the dancer.
All we do is bend over, but it looks like all of the ponies are doing a handstand. There was this one time where like I bent over and all I heard was like metal, like falling, like not falling, but like, and I thought the whole back end of my pony just collapsed. So I'm bent over in a handstand, and while everybody's turning, I panic and I just walk off the stage because I don't want to move. And they're like, what's wrong? I was like, it's broken. They're like, what's broken? I was like, it's just the back end fell. And they're like, no, your ass is still up in the air. Can't even remember. It was like it was like one little screw came out, but it was so loud that I was like, I gotta go. Like, I have to get off the stage. Like, my costume is gonna fall off my body.
And that's it. That's all the information I could scrounge up on My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party. Well, sort of. I have been working on this project for almost a year, and when I tell people about my research, I am almost always asked a different version of the same question. Why? Why are you doing this? Why do you care so much? Why are you putting so much time and energy into researching a production of a random children's show? And I've always had a really difficult time answering these questions because there was no world where I didn't approach this with the level of seriousness that I did. But I also know that nobody cares about something this much unless it reveals something secret within their heart and soul. So I did a little bit of thinking, and the question that I kept going back to
was what makes something worth researching? What makes something important enough to document and archive? As someone who has worked in children's entertainment spaces, I find that its importance and relevance is often dismissed by both consumers, but also people who work in adjacent industries. Children's theater is dismissed by people who work in normal theater for adults. It is often treated like a last resort, something you do if you can't find more sophisticated work elsewhere, regardless of how competitive these jobs are, or how much experience the people working on them have. Children's film and television is viewed as the easy way out, treated with the assumption that because these stories are easy to consume, they must be easy to create. During my time at film school, I developed several projects for younger audiences, and my peers often assumed that my work was less serious, less complex, and less researched purely because of who my target demographic was. And don't even get me started on children's experiences. Museums where you can meet the Cat in the Hat, princesses you can book for your birthday party, puppets you can chat with at the library. These are viewed as stepping stones towards a bigger, better career. And for a lot of people, especially the college students and recent grads who make up the bulk of these employees, that might be true. But why can't this be someone's end goal? Why can't this be the place that somebody finds fulfillment? Granted, this is largely due to the fact that these jobs don't pay well enough, or even stick around long enough to be consistent employment. But I do think there is this expectation that people should want more from themselves. And I don't know if I think that expectation is valid or not. Because when I talk to these people who dedicated years of their life to My Little Pony Live, I don't see people who took the easy way out. I don't see people who did something easy. I see artists with literal decades of experience. I see athletes who carried the literal weight of the show on their shoulders. And I see the perseverance and the dedication and the passion it takes to work day in and day out to bring this show to life. And for that reason alone, I think that My Little Pony Live deserves to be taken seriously and deserves to be celebrated. And for me, truly, there is no greater act of love than researching, documenting, and archiving something, and assuring that something can be remembered for years and years to come. But even if that wasn't the case, I can't help but think how many children have been impacted, myself included, by this production, of the memories that were made, of the future theater goers that were born.
I think it's really interesting to think about the impact that this show had on the kids who were in the audience.
The fun part about the Ladybugs is we often got to go into the audience and, interact and give like hugs or twirl and dance. And that was really magical to me because you just saw the kids light up, and for some reason they thought you were a rock star. And I'm like, I'm just a pink ladybug, but okay.
And also there were kids that would dress up. I saw that.
We did have a couple of Make-A-Wish kids come.
It was almost like a rock concert for kids. A lot of times if we were in an arena, the kids would come right up to the stage. There was sort of a standing area in front of the stage, and kids would just stand there. They would dance the entire time. They would have their costumes on. They would have their favorite pony in their hand.
Theater for young people is so important. It exposes them to an art form in a way that resonates with them, and then they carry it on with them for the rest of their life. Just like when I saw Sesame when I was 5. I have carried that with me my entire life. I am 44. I still remember Grover running on stage and saying, "Hello, everybody." Like I remember that. Like performing is great and traveling is great, but that right there, at least for me, is like the best. Like I want to cry. Like that's the best thing.
Because I also remember my first theater experiences when I was younger.
I did grow up going to some shows. I grew up in Detroit area and going to the Fox Theater, and as a dancer, I just was so excited to see anything on stage. So I was hoping that I could do that for some kids too.
And then those are going to be our future crews and our future actors, and it's going to continue the art to grow and evolve. And like we won't have our art form in the future if people aren't growing up in love with it and having the passion that we have.
We played Rosemont in Chicago. Some young people I knew in my life at that point, they came with their parents, and that was fun because I got to actually see them after the show. And obviously I said, I got to help Sweetberry. And they didn't know it was me.
Having the next generation of theater lovers start with V Corporation or with just in family entertainment in general is such an important thing. And I'm so excited that I was a part of it.
And on top of that, we should care about the media that our children consume and the stories that they carry with them.
Digging a little bit deeper into the show itself and the idea of where My Little Pony was at that time, we had a lot of conversations with the team from Hasbro who talked about how, you know, these ponies are little girls, and the storylines in these shows are about little girls embracing being little girls, doing little girl things, like having girl power, and just sort of, you know, empowering the kids who were sitting at home watching the show. And that was something that I think we all took seriously.
Our show specifically touched on dynamics between friends and how to fix our mistakes or look at what we do and how we look at ourselves in terms of perfectionism. You know, when we're planning the tea party and something goes wrong, what do? How do we use community? How do we use our friends? That's what I think theater is really great at for adults and for kids, is allowing people to tap into their own emotions. I wish more people would hold it to a higher value, and to this day, keep taking their kids to see it if it's accessible.
Back when I was performing and we came to Grand Rapids, and my aunt brought her 2 grandchildren who were 2 little boys. They danced, were like wrapped up in like the streamers, and they had their pennants and they were waving them in the front row. We were performing a show that people would generally think is for little girls, but here are these 2 little boys that are like rocking their socks off, having the time of their life. That is why it's so important to do what we do, because kids don't look at theater the same way adults do. Kids look at them with this like open, accepting eyes. Like, yes, like we should do it because we love it, but we should also do it because we should inspire people. And if it's inspiring a kid by showing them what the art form is, great. If it's inspiring an adult by sharing a story that they can resonate with, like, great. But like, there needs to be more to why we do theater than just, oh, I like it, because it can be more impactful than I think sometimes people realize.
We had very well sold shows. So there's a demand for kids to be exposed to live theater, live performance that is suited for them.
It's not any less professional. There's not any less work and effort and commitment put into it. It's serious business for something that's so kind of silly. Like, objectively, My Little Pony, the world's biggest tea party, is like silly, but it's something that is taken very seriously by a lot of people to make a quality production.
I think performers don't realize how important it is for their own development to be able to perform for children. Kids are like, they're unforgiving almost. They're watching every detail. They're absorbing every moment. They oftentimes have no preconceived notion of what the show is that they're going to see, other than it's like, oh, we're going to go see My Little Pony live. I know what a My Little Pony is.
Their audiences are the most formative people, are the most, first of all, honest people. And they will tell you if the show is, if they like the show or not.
I never looked at the show as just something that was frivolous or a silly thing. I always took it seriously. I knew that it was important to the kids, so it was important to me.
And you know what? Sure, it's a My Little Pony stage show. But 20 years ago, I was a little kid who loved My Little Pony. I was a kid who had the opportunity to see my favorite characters come to life right before my eyes. And it was an experience that I have carried with me ever since then. It was a fun day with my mom. It was a magical memory that I got to share with all of the other kids in that audience. And that alone makes it worth it. That alone makes it special. And while a video like this might seem a little silly, I can't help but think of all of the shows, big and small, that will be forgotten because no one took the time to remember. And my God, I will do everything in my power to make sure that that does not happen for My Little Pony Live, the world's biggest tea party.
I got a kid in my class.
Hey, John.
And we got My Little Ponies.
Blanket, finally!
John, baby, I think we're gonna...
That's my favorite blanket. I'll feed him.
Wow, that's a big blanket.
Yeah, they don't make My Little Pony blankets.
You
Huh?
did?
What is it?
Fancy fashions with desert rose and so-and-so.
You asked for that at the mall? Asked Santa or what?
From my parents' basement. That was the one for, I don't have a big one. I do not even have a small one. Yeah, this one. My Little Pony Live little play tea set that I got. His color. I have no idea who this diva is. That's Sparkle Tush.
What is it? What is it?
Out of the boxes.
Not now. What is it, Aiden? I can't see it. Pinkie Pie's house? Cool.
With all of that being said, thank you so much to all of the incredible people who let me interview them for this video. Your time, your knowledge, and your excitement is so deeply appreciated. Truly, this video would not be possible without you. You have brought so much joy to my life and to the process of creating this video, and I just cannot thank you enough. Thank you to my mom for taking me to the show when I was 6 years old, and thank you to all of you for sticking around for however long this video is going to be. All of my videos are unsponsored, so if you'd like to help me out a little bit, feel free to donate to the Ko-Fi or Venmo linked in the description box down below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see all of you in the next video. Bye!